Question number 6, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston
Does he
Peters.
stand by his statement? That, and I quote him, I don't think foreigners buying the odd house in New Zealand is what's driving the escalation of prices. End of quotes.
Mr Speaker,
Right Honourable
yes.
Prime Minister. Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Does he think it fair that New Zealanders struggling to buy their first home have to compete with overseas buyers financed by state-owned banks with interest rates 5 times... No, my name's not Joyce.
Order.
You make it up,
Order.
I don't.
Order.
Well, can you tell Beggars to keep quiet?
Order. That's a good example. Order. It's a very good example of the disorder that is possible because of interjections while the member's asking his question.
Thank you,
if the
Speaker.
member would please start his question again.
Does he think it fair that New Zealanders struggling to buy their first home have to compete with overseas buyers financed by state-owned banks with interest rates 5 times lower than the New Zealand buyer has to pay?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, firstly, I'm pleased the members raised interest rates because under a national-led government, a family with a $300,000 mortgage in New Zealand is saving about $230 a week as a result of the good economic management of this government. Secondly, if we just do want to inject a few facts into this issue, house prices have risen from November 2008 to June 2013 in terms of the national median sale price.
Point of order, Speaker.
Point of order, Right Honourable
Speaker,
Winston.
the critical part of the question is the issue of fairness.
Order. Order.
Based on the disparity of interest rates.
Order.
That's the issue.
Order. The member cannot raise a legitimate point of order saying the pertinent part or the critical part of the question is whatever. The member asked the question, the Prime Minister has the opportunity to answer the question, and at this stage I think...
Well, my subtle point is he's not answering it.
Well, on this occasion, I don't agree with the member. I think the Prime Minister...
Why am I not surprised?
Order. I think the Prime Minister is in the process of addressing the question as it was asked by the member.
Mr Speaker, so to continue, Mr Speaker, the second point is that median house prices have risen under a national-led government in that period of time, 2008 to 2013, by 12%, and by a Labor government in their time in office by over 100%. But if the member wants to ask specifically about interest rates, actually, a New Zealander could borrow money on the international market and enjoy those cheap interest rates. For instance, David Shearer could take the money out of his US account and holding 0%.
Order.
Point of order, Speaker.
Order. I have a point of order from the Right Honourable member, and it will be heard in order.
Mr Speaker.
This is a point of order, and it will be heard in silence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my point of order was that he was asked a question on the issue of fairness as it relates to the disparity of overseas buyers who can access state bank and funds at less than 1%, as opposed to New Zealand buyer paying 5 to 6% minimum. Now, I asked the question whether he agreed it was fair or not. He made no attempt to answer that question.
Well, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with the member. It was a very long-winded answer, and the final point that the Prime Minister raised is there's the ability for a New Zealand buyer to equally borrow from a foreign bank at those rates if they so declare.
No, point of order, Speaker.
Point of order, Right
The final
Honourable.
point he raised was the access to a private member of Parliament's bank account. That's the final point he raised.
And order. That was an unnecessary part of the answer. As soon as the Prime Minister attempted to address that, I stood and asked the Prime Minister to cease. Does the member have a further supplementary?
Well, of course I do. Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Supplementary question. Why does his government allow foreigners to buy houses here where New Zealanders are not allowed to buy houses in those countries from which those foreigners are coming?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, in many jurisdictions around the world, of course, New Zealanders are entitled to buy houses, but Just to put a bit of reality into this, let's quote someone who might know what they're talking about in this area, and that is Shamabal Yaqub, who said about house prices for the past 15 years have trended up relative to incomes and rents for the entire period. To suggest that's because of foreign interest in the property market seems ludicrous. It reeks of poor policy making. It reeks of xenophobia.
Order.
It's a solution instead of a...
Order. I have a point of order.
Speaker, again, my point is, I'm asking the Prime Minister, why is it fair to allow foreigners to buy here when the country from whence those foreigners come denies New Zealanders a chance to buy a house there? It's a pretty simple question.
And the Prime Minister answered that, and the member can go back and look at the transcript by saying he doesn't agree with the way the member has phrased the question. New Zealanders are able to buy in some markets overseas.
Point of order, Speaker.
Point of order, right, Honourable Winston.
I seek to table a letter written by a New Zealander, dated 24th of June, name taken off for obvious reasons, explaining why it is so unfair and one-sided that he cannot buy a house in China and they can buy a house in New Zealand.
Order. Leave us sought to table that particular letter. Is there any objection to it being tabled? Yes, there is. Question number 7, Eugenie Sage.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Thank you. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and